Hey everybody, it's Cam from Bulwark, your favorite political commentator. I just did MSDNC last night, and then this morning we did a little bit of a bender at 30 Rock, and I want to show you some clips from it because I feel like I did an all right job. Let me know in the comments down below what you think of my performance. But it was the weekend primetime hour and then the weekend morning hour. And I gotta say, the people in the morning at the NBC studios, they got so much pep in their step. Like, they're vibing so hard. They're so energetic. And you really got to hand it to them. I did like the 5 a.m. hour 2 weeks ago, and everyone was so bright and peppy. Like, I imagine if they're going to have to wake up that early, they just say, fuck it, we're going to tough it out. But anyway, we're going to cut right to the chase. We were talking No Kings. We were talking Graham Platner and plenty of other interesting things. Yes, I'm still wearing makeup right now. I literally just got home and haven't wiped it off yet. But let's take a look at what we discussed and see if we can learn any valuable lessons from what me and the other panelists had to say.
Millions of everyday Americans of all ages and backgrounds turning out with protest signs, costumes, and most importantly, a single unified message for President Trump. There are no kings in America. Organizers of today's No Kings rally estimate 7 million people turned out at more than 2,500 peaceful events across the country. That's about 1 out of every 50 people in the United States. So many that even Trump couldn't ignore it.
Do you think that the government shutdown is all about this rally that's happening this weekend, the No Kings rally?
No, I mean, some people say they want to delay it for a king. This is not a king. You know, they're referring to me as a king. I'm not a king.
Right.
And joining us now are Cameron Kasky, co-host of the Bulwark's For You podcast.
I'm curious because there's been a lot of debate as to what these protests are from the Republican side. Mike Johnson the Speaker of the House has tried to portray this as Antifa, which ironically enough and dangerously enough, the administration has now called a domestic terrorist organization. He tried to say that these were Hamas-loving protesters, they're anti-American, and basically take these 7 million people, including you, and we've been hearing from Jacob Soboroff and others, basically trying to portray them as people who hate America. And I want to give you a chance to respond to that as somebody who participated in a No Kings march today.
First of all, it's so weird to me the way the Republicans are responding to this, because if I were them, I would just ignore it. I feel as though this is a Streisand effect situation where they are drawing far more attention to this by crashing out. But look, I was there today and I made a bunch of observations. First of all, not a lot of very young people. I think that my generation saw the definitive movements of our lifetime, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, the March for Our Lives, and said, okay, well, we're still watching black boys get murdered by cops. Somebody's getting put up for mayor in New York City who has a dozen credible sexual harassment allegations. We're still seeing schools get shot up. What are these protests going to do for us? You know, the boomers who came out, and there were so very many of them, they saw the Vietnam protests, the civil rights protests, and there was something tangible that came out of that. But the protests that we've seen, there's been so much great awareness that's been spread. There have been victories on a smaller level, but they haven't felt like these protests have directly led to what we are going for. So that was one of the things I observed. The other thing was, like, I don't know, this kind of reminded me of my education growing up. When you go to Hebrew school, you learn about fascism a little bit younger than the other kids. And you find yourself asking, in the face of authoritarianism, in the face of seeing a genocide happen before the entire world, what would I do? How would I react? Would I sit back and let it happen like so many people seem to have done when authoritarianism came for us? Or would I say something about it? And I think a lot of the people who came out to protest today, whether they had a direct ask from a policy perspective, they were meeting this moment and saying, in the face of fascism, in the face of rising authoritarianism, I want to at least know that I did something, and I want to know that I showed up.
Let's play some sound from the White House Press Secretary Karen Leavitt about how she described the protests, because I think it's important in this political moment to really think about how the words we're using matters.
The Democrat Party's main constituency are made up of Hamas terrorists, illegal aliens, and violent criminals. That is who the Democrat Party is catering to, not the Trump administration and not the White House and not the Republican Party, who is standing up for law-abiding Americans, not just across the country, but around the world.
So equating your political foe to a terrorist, is that...
Sorry, it's even worse than that. It's equating Americans with terrorists. It's not just political foes.
Well, but this is how the dehumanization of our political enemies, and I thought we were stopping to do that, but I guess when they're protesters you don't agree with, it becomes okay again?
They are doing everything they can for organizations like Palantir to be able to increase their own authoritarian grasp on our country. They're writing giant contracts to surveillance groups, and they want to be able to increase their ability to surveil us. So using Hamas sympathizer, terrorist, Antifa. First of all, Antifa as an organization makes no sense, because as somebody who spends a lot of time working with people who are on the far left cannot organize a dinner party. So the thought of the far left organizing something that substantial, it's like, honestly, that's
what's the Will Rogers line? I don't belong to any organized political party. I'm a Democrat, or something like that.
There you have it. So, but seriously, like, they're saying these things because they want ICE to have an easier time targeting people who are completely innocent. They're saying this because they want more leeway to come after Americans just because they might be saying things that aren't making the administration happy. And it's clear as day. And they're being very transparent about it, by the way.
I wore the uniform since I was 18 years old. I never thought I would see this. Never. We have military, I don't care whether they're National Guards or active duty, patrolling and turning weapons, if you will, on our citizens. This is democracy, you know, and I never thought I would see it.
So I know that people are worried about young people right now feeling really disheartened, disengaged, unsure of what comes next. But are you at all heartened by sort of the age gap that you actually see right there? Of the first woman you met's in her 20s, just going to college now. And then that gentleman, he retired from the Army in 2009. He had enlisted in 1967, another year with a lot going on in the United States. Is this moment actually a moment that requires that kind of collaboration, cross-generational conversation? Is that actually a sign of a healthy democracy that, you know, a 24-year-old and a man in his 80s can find common ground?
Parents, grandparents, they have always been at the heart of movements like this for change. I mean, I started my adult life doing gun violence prevention work. Moms Demand Action is one of the strongest organizations in the world for this type of thing. And it's so important. And I think young people and old people alike, no matter what, you know, political differences they might have, they understand that Donald Trump is not the only king we need to be protesting right now. There's kings like Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, the Ellisons. There are so many people we ought to be raising our voices against, and however old you are has nothing to do with that. The whole okay boomer thing is obviously such nonsense. The most popular progressive in the United States is 1 trillion years old, and he's a grump at that. He doesn't even act like a young person. So obviously this intergenerational work is so meaningful, and I think people are not going to be pointing the finger at each other anymore for those, you know, annoying young kids or those grumpy old folks. The tent is getting bigger, and a lot of people are showing this meaningful opposition no matter who they are.
We have sound from House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Now he's British.
I really? Did I go British?
A little British. You sound a little British.
Sorry. This is what he had to say about yesterday's No Kings protests on ABC a little bit ago.
The irony of the message is pretty clear for everyone. If President Trump was a king, the government would be open right now. If President Trump was a king, they would not have been able to engage in that free speech exercise out on the mall. I've never called anybody an enemy, but we call out...
Hate America rally or, you know, Antifa, pro-Hamas, those are enemies.
Well, there were a lot of hateful messages yesterday. I mean, we have video and photos of pretty violent rhetoric, calling out the president, saying fascists must die and all the rest. I mean, I don't think that's loving speech. I don't think that's friendly speech. And I don't think it's pro-American to say those kinds of things. So it's not about the people. It's about the message. It's about the ideology.
The speaker said the irony of the message is pretty clear to everyone. If President Trump were a king, the White House themselves are putting out pictures and videos of Trump with crowns on, trying to be cute on the internet when folks are saying he's a king, instead of saying, we're not like, he doesn't want to be a king. He wants to be president of the United States. Talk about that kind of like complete detachment from reality that Mike Johnson seems to be living in, where the White House is actually leaning into the idea of Donald Trump as a king.
I think them posting the picture of him as a king is part of this power fantasy that has defined not only the administration, but also the efforts that got Trump in the White House again in the first place. It was a power fantasy for the disaffected white men who wanted to feel as though this was their country again. It was a power fantasy for people around the country who wanted some sort of say in their future. Trump came in and said, we need to disrupt the machine and provide something new that can really give you some agency here when you feel like you don't have any. And you see all these AI videos celebrating alligator Alcatraz, the powerful ICE secret police force and things like that. They want to paint a picture of Trump as this effective king, this king who can have his way no matter what he says. And I think that when it comes to Mike Johnson's messaging, there's just a very big lack of coordination across the board in this administration, whether that's them saying the Epstein files are a Democrat hoax or them saying, no, the Epstein files don't even exist in the first place, but also we're going to release the Epstein files. I don't think they have very good messaging meetings. I think everybody just kind of goes for it, but unfortunately, the base doesn't hold them accountable for it, so they're just going to keep on, throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks.
There's a Democratic Senate candidate who's now under fire for some of his past statements that he has made. Graham Platner, the oyster farmer who's running in the Democratic primary for Senate in Maine, apologized on Friday after past social media posts in which he referred to himself as a communist, criticized police, called rural white Americans racist and stupid, criticized black people for not tipping, and also made pretty egregious comments about rape and sexual assault. Is there room for someone like that in the Democratic Party, Cameron, even if he does apologize and say that that is no longer representative of how he feels and what he stands for?
Well, I was born in 2000, which means that the candidates from my generation are all going to have history of comments that they made online. And this is a pivotal moment for the party to say, okay, to what standard are we going to be holding people? Does it matter when somebody comes out and holds themselves accountable, recognizes their wrongdoing, and says they're going to do better? Or is there going to be a purity test in every single election? I think that we ought to accept and support people taking accountability and saying that they've done something wrong. But it's worth noting that members of the Democratic establishment who are currently going after Platner for his comments also supported Andrew Cuomo for mayor of New York City with a dozen credible sexual harassment allegations. So respectfully, I would take the candidate who said something wrong and apologized for it over the candidate who did a dozen completely disgusting things and refuses to acknowledge that he even did in the first place and attacks the people who accused him.
I'm bringing up Zohran Mamdani and Cuomo and not Curtis Lewa because this clip I want to show has Andrew Cuomo and Zohran Mamdani. Play it, please.
He literally has never had a job. On his resume, it says he interned for his mother. This is not a job for a first-timer. Any day, you could have a hurricane, you have, God forbid, a 9/11, a health pandemic. If you don't know what you're doing,
Cuomo.
people could die.
Mr. Mamdani, you want to respond?
And if we have a health pandemic, then why would New Yorkers turn back to the governor who sent seniors to their death in nursing homes? That's the kind of experience that's on offer here today. What I don't have in experience, I make up for in integrity. And what you don't have in integrity, you could never make up for in experience.
Yes.
Cam?
When they call Mamdani's qualifications into question, it always makes me think, are you satisfied with how the qualified people are putting up in opposition to the Trump administration right now? Are the qualified people making you happy in office? Do you think that they're doing a good job? I don't really know, because to be honest with you, the people who fit the qualifications that we try to hold these politicians to, I think they're all kind of fumbling spectacularly right now. So perhaps we ought to reshift what we consider qualified.
So I would take that to mean that you don't agree with Bernie Sanders' assessment that Marjorie Taylor Greene is a, quote, good Republican.
Bernie Sanders, to me, is like your beloved grandfather, where he says all these things, and you're like, Grandpa, you're so cute. I love you. But then he'll say something, and you're like, okay, Grandpa, all right, calm down. I think that there's this thing that happens in politics where we hear something that is the least bit refreshing from somebody who otherwise is pretty consistently displaying signs of psychosis, and we want to reward them for it because what they're saying is refreshing, but eventually you start to realize, wait, this person has had a career built on lies, disinformation, manipulating people to believe very harmful things, and therefore, like, Bernie, respectfully, if you're watching this, you can say that something Marjorie Taylor Greene said is correct and that she made a good point without handing it to her. You don't got to hand it to her.